Hello everyone. Yeah, it's a black screen. I've got my phone laying down. I've got it on a paper, but I'm just talking. So, um, this video is going to cover some of the case surrounding my uncle, which is my mother's brother. He died on October 18th, 1983. Now I have to give a little bit of a backstory in order for some of this to make sense. My grandmother had him, and then she married my grandfather. He adopted my uncle. My uncle's name was Harold Eugene Collier. My grandfather's name was Arthur Gene Collier. And the Gene and Eugene had no relation. Like, that was just their names even before they met. Okay, so my grandfather was not a very nice man. Straight up, he was part of the KKK. And he was not one of those that would actually hide it. He was pretty open about it in the little small town that we lived in. He forced my mother to give a baby up for adoption when she was 18 years old, but still living at home. And I recently found my sister that was born in 1966 and adopted out from the hospital. But everything I remember about my grandfather is him causing problems, him doing the most harm. He was a deacon at the church there in a small town that we lived in, but he divorced my grandmother because he found a younger woman. Quote, younger woman. She ended up being like 6-7 years older than my grandmother, which made no sense, but that was, expected from him. When I was 2, they got their divorce. And me and my mom moved in because my mom started going through her divorce with my dad that's on my birth certificate. Not my bio dad and not my stepdad that I sometimes refer to. This man I hardly ever make anything about. He's a whole other story. But we moved in with my grandmother. Like right after March. My birthday's in March. And I know that just from pictures, like I don't actually remember it, but I know from some baby pictures that I had received a twin bed and a dresser and a couple of other things like a toy box and some new toys and stuff for my birthday because it was needed in order to move into my grandmother's home. Okay, so my mom's going through her divorce, and my grandmother had just got her divorce. And my grandfather moves to Terre Haute, Indiana. Well, after that, I don't really hear much about my grandfather. He doesn't come around. When he does come around, I'm not allowed to go anywhere with him. Come to find out, he had molested all of his girls, and possibly my uncle that he had adopted. He was just all around bad guy. So you can already imagine, wherever he goes, trouble follows. Okay, so speed ahead a little bit. I'm about 11 or 12. And we're sitting around, and it's around Christmas time. my grandma and my mom's doing everything that they can to make Christmas happy. And I never had any issues with Christmas or birthdays or anything like that. They did their best, and I was one of those kids that, I seen the effort that was put into everything. So, I had my birthday party, and some family comes over that I don't really know, which happened to be my aunt, which was my mom's sister, that lived in North Carolina. Well, I'm supposed to be in bed, but I sneak out the window and I go sit on the front porch. Why I snuck out and went and sat on the front porch, who knows. But I did. So they are in the living room talking, and my aunt asks my mom and my grandma if they've heard anything about my grandfather. Well, of course, they both say no. They say how he's not allowed around there. And my aunt, her attitude, she was just like her father. Like, I never did care much for her. But she was talking about, how he was sick and he was wanting family to come together. I mean, the guy had allergies. It was like nothing major. Well, I guess at that point, my grandmother feels that it's time to tell her daughters, exactly how their father was. Well, she mentions back in 1983, shortly after we had made a trip out to Illinois to go see my uncle, he dies. Just randomly. He was pretty young. I mean, 42, which is the age I am now. But he dies and he's in Terre Haute, Indiana, where my grandfather is. Apparently, he got out there. My grandfather supposedly had gotten a job or something lined up for him, and he moved out there a few months before. His wife and his 2 kids was killed in a car wreck. Well, as far as I can tell, and I don't have their names and stuff just with me at this moment, but from everything that I can tell, they just ruled it as an accident. They were hit by a train. And my grandmother was talking about how my uncle always stayed up on the cars. He was always, even out of state, he was always calling her to make sure that, my mom had changed the oil in our car. He would call and ask if, gas money or whatever was needed, or if the tires were aired up. Like, he was pretty big, not a mechanic per se, but pretty big on, basic car safety. It's not going to stall out in the middle of the road. But yeah, his wife and his 2 sons are stalled out on a train track, or put on a train track and killed. Then, a few months after that, my grandfather goes into a restaurant. He starts using my uncle's name. Nobody knew why, but my uncle was receiving notices. Apparently at the time, restaurants and stuff, if you had made reservations or whatever, they would later send you out like a menu in the mail, or kind of a update if they got a new item on the menu or some stuff like that. Well, my uncle never went to these places, but yet he was getting the menus or the updates or whatever. So he goes there, he starts questioning it. He ends up dead. And on his death certificate, where is it at? Yeah. Cause of death: asphyxiation and drowning. Now, it says, victim was found floating in the water by fishermen 1 mile north of Fort Harrison on USA 1, Terre Haute, Indiana. It says that yes for the autopsy. Yeah, right there. Yes for the autopsy. It was signed 10/31/83, pronounced dead 10/22/83 at 5:05 p.m. The funeral home, Thomas Funeral Home, it was located at 2200 North 13th Street in Terre Haute. Okay. My uncle was a great swimmer. He was a hiker. He was always outdoors doing something. Always. But yet, at this ravine, it wasn't even a lake or, a river or anything like that. It was just a little, from the way my grandmother described it, was basically just a little ravine off the side of the road that was pretty shallow. But there was no investigation. They just ruled it as asphyxiation and drowning. There's nothing on this death certificate that says anything about murder. It doesn't say anything about accident. It doesn't say suspicious. And apparently they would not listen to my grandmother because my grandfather, who was his legal adopted father, made all the arrangements for him. So they were talking to the man that I am pretty sure had something to do with his death. Now, it is said, and I have not been able to find any newspaper articles or anything that would name him or my grandfather, but apparently that store or that place that my grandfather was using my uncle's name, it got shot up like a drive-by, mafia style, not just a little gang, it basic mafia. But they had, or my grandfather had the reservation for that night in my uncle's name, but neither one of them showed up. My uncle didn't know about it, of course, but my grandfather somehow got busy and just didn't show up, or his date canceled, or whatever, however that went down. Okay, so a few days, maybe a couple months, I'm hearing this through my grandmother talking to her two daughters. Okay, so I don't know exact dates and details. It might have been 2 or 3 days, it might have been 6 months. But from the time that nobody was there when that reservation was made, that place getting bullet holes all through it, then my uncle's wife and 2 sons get killed on a railroad by a train, and then my uncle gets found in a little ravine. And his usual occupation that it says on this was housekeeping. And I believe he was a janitor at a hospital. I do not know which hospital. I know that he did work at a couple of hospitals in Illinois before he had moved to Indiana. So, from what I have heard, alright, let's put it that way. Everything that I have heard makes me pretty sure that he worked at a hospital in Vigo County, Indiana. And, oh, yeah, right here on it, it gives his social security number, then it says housekeeping, and it says Terre Haute Regional Hospital. 100 North Brown Avenue, number 12. There we go. There we go. So yes, he was housekeeping at a hospital. See, that right there just verifies that the stuff that I actually heard that night, you know, it is how it is. Like, all this happened. And my grandmother was the type that she would be so freaking honest that, you know, she didn't care if the truth hurt, she told you anyway. Which, I mean, that right there, I love that lady. Like, she had my respect from the time I was born. So, I know, I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I want more details. Oh, and it also says he is widowed. So, that verifies that his wife died a little bit before him. And it doesn't say anything about children, but I know he had 2 boys, and I know that they died with his wife. Anyway, okay, back to the information. So, Molly Meeks. I'm not exactly sure. It says paralegal, legal department, city of Terre Haute. It gives her phone number and all of this stuff. I found her while I was looking for like the coroner or the police chief or whatever. I sent in a basic Information Act request asking for any police reports, any autopsy reports, anything that surrounded the case of my uncle. She replies back with a search of Terre Haute Police Department records found no records related to the October 1983 death of Harold Eugene Collier. As such, your request must be denied because no responsive records were identified. Please do not hesitate to contact this office directly to submit any future requests for the public. Okay. How can there be a death certificate from Terre Haute with all of this stuff going on and there not be any police reports? There has to be. Because even if I am wrong and he did simply drown, there is a police report. There has to be something. You know, somebody that's dead on the side of the road and a fisherman finds them, then who are they going to call? They're going to call the police. I mean, unless the fisherman is a coroner and he just backs up the body and, I doubt that would actually be legal or whatever, but who knows. And this is in 83. We're not talking about like in the 1920s or 30s. At least in 83, law enforcement had, more information on how to handle cases and stuff. So then I sent a request for information to Sean Keene. I believe he's like he may be the coroner. I don't know. Anyway, I wrote to one of them, a coroner, and to the police chief. Don't exactly know who's who. But I wrote a letter to him on June 30th, and I still have no reply from him. Unless, perhaps, that one letter, maybe that one person got both letters at some point. I don't know. But it's not making sense. It is totally just not making sense. And when I wrote again asking if there was any officers from that time that could be contacted, I got no response. And then Donna Wedger is another one that I wrote to. I wrote to her on June 29th. And on this one, this is, I guess, is the coroner. Because on Find a Grave, it says that the county or city or county or whatever it was made the payment for his burial because the family had no money. But yet my grandfather was talking to them about his burial and what he was going to wear and when a service was going to be, and basically keeping my grandmother out of the loop on everything associated to her son's death. That right there is fishy all alone. I mean, for real. And in this one, I wrote some stuff, but then I said, in the burial announcement, it says that the family has no money and that someone may have had a policy. I know my grandfather did have a policy out on him as well as he had money, so that furthers my questioning as to why my grandfather would deny my uncle a proper burial while collecting money on him, other than the fact he was a cold-hearted evil man. All of this plus more leads me to wanting to view the autopsy report as well as a copy of his death certificate, because at that time I didn't have this. I just actually found this death certificate today. I would like to know the day and time of his death as well as what other info is available. My uncle's name was Harold Eugene Collier. He was born June 21st of 1941. Any info that you can send me will be greatly appreciated. I request this info under the Freedom of Information Act. 1. Copy of autopsy report conducted on my above-mentioned uncle. 2. Copy of death certificate if available. 3. Name of medical examiner on his case. But I get a letter back telling me that there is no such files. There is no files to be found whatsoever that has to do with my uncle's death. None. But this right here, this specifically says Terre Haute. It gives the place that he worked. It gives his sister as next of kin. But she was not even contacted. Father's name, Arthur Collier. Mother's name, Dorothy Giles. My mother's name was not listed. My mother's name was not listed on this. And yeah, I get it. My Aunt Jenny, she was in Terre Haute, but she's not the one that did anything for the funeral. Nothing. He's buried at Highland Lawn. I mean, the only thing I've seen, is just what's on Find a Grave. Which you can use this information and you can look up Find a Grave. Maybe you can, somebody that's familiar with something in that area can maybe find more information than I can from here. Because over here in Oklahoma, it's like we're down in the abyss because just trying to find my sister for years and years and years from Oklahoma up to Illinois by New Lenox and Joliet, Illinois. Oh my gosh, that was like horrific. And with a death, you can imagine. But right here, immediate cause, it says A, pending. 12/2/83. Coroner's report added. Asphyxiation and drowning. There is nothing that says murder. That man was murdered. And there has to be something that I can do. No, I do not want to open up cases and, try to prosecute the mafia or something. No, I'd much rather just leave them alone. I'm not so much worried about the who did it as to why they did it. Because I know it had something to do with my grandfather. And his name was Arthur Eugene Collier. I don't remember his birth date or anything like that, but I want to say he died anywhere from like 1999 to like 2004, maybe, somewhere in there. I can't remember. My grandmother died in 2001, and I don't remember if I was told he died a little bit before her or just a little bit after her. But either way, I'm not really, as bad as it sounds, I'm not really looking for the whole justice side of this. I just want to know if indeed my grandfather did have something to do with my uncle's death. Perhaps he owed the wrong people money and they went after my uncle. I'm pretty sure my grandfather pissed off the wrong people because he pissed off everybody. But, yeah. That's about it. That's pretty much about all I have on this, other than a box full of suspicion. So, thanks for listening, and if anybody has any idea of who I can contact, including like an email address or a telephone number, preferably email, maybe there's a state representative that I could talk to, or Doug Carter. He is the superintendent. Is he the superintendent over the whole state, or like just over the Delphi stuff? Maybe I need to look into that. Okay, it's the middle of the night and my brain is wandering. But yeah, if anybody has any ideas on who I can talk to, or any churches that has been there around that area for, since back in the 70s and 80s that, would possibly remember this case. Not that it was much of a case, but you know what I mean. Anything there that could hopefully give me some sort of insight would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.